just these scenarios here. Pick which one suits your response. We've got Viv Richards, Smokin' Joe. What a song. We've got Ben Harper, live at Splendor. We've got somehow with 2 days' notice or a night's notice, Toto, 2003, Night at the Proms. You've stepped in to help the drummer. We've got Echo Homo video. I think you might be playing guitar in that video. Jimmy Barnes co-produced Love and Fear. Richard Clapton, you produced Glory Road at 26 years of age. I was still learning how to walk and talk. We've got a revenue raiser rumour that you and maybe someone from Grinspoon and Powderfinger did a revenue raiser at a school in Byron Bay. I've got a memory. I don't know if that's true. I've got, there are a few things I'm throwing at you quickly for time reasons. Any of them connect with you?
Oh, sure. Well, I'll just go backwards. So the thing with Pat Davin and Bernard Fanning was simply because our kids were at the same school.
Yes.
And so we thought, well, what a quick way to raise some capital for the school was to just come together and we did this thing like a yacht rock gig.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
So, we played things like,
Key Logo.
Well, no, that would have been a good one. No, we did things like to the Cross, Ride Like the Wind.
Yes.
We did Lido by Boz Scaggs.
Yes.
Now, the fun thing about Lido with Boz Scaggs, of course, is that's Toto.
Yes, it's David Page.
Okay, so Dave Page, Steve Lukather, a really great friend of mine.
Yes.
Of course, Mike Picaro and his brother Jeff Picaro.
Yeah. Yes.
So they were in with Boz Scaggs. I got into that album in 1976, 77.
Silk Degrees.
Silk Degrees. I had it on. Yeah. I think I burnt a hole with the needle on the vinyl on that one. And so with the shuffle, that song is.
What about What Can I Say? That still sounds great. What can I say?
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff is you'll see and hear in my drumming and in my songwriting. I'm always saluting and tilting my hat to those periods, those eras, those epochs of music. Whether it be Motown or disco or that oldest early '70s funk, R&B, blues. But I'm always, and so they did the same thing, and that's why it's timeless, because. But anyway, and then the Toto thing was a complete I was Steve Lukather around me, Johnny, how you doing, man? Like, good. He goes, hey man, you're sitting down. I'm like, yeah. I've just got a vodka and a plate of food in front of me, and he's like, well, you got to play tomorrow night with Toto. I'm like, fuck, what? So then he sent me the charts, to my hotel room. So I went back to the hotel and there's a whole stack of charts. I'm like, I don't read charts.
No.
So I just had to carve it out of ear and
out of memory for being a fan, I guess.
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of it is. See, the thing is with Toto, and this is what they do. This is why musos love them. Is because their abilities and their styles are so bloody good, and they're so well crafted that they've honed it over years. That, of course, Jeff Picaro's style is very unique to him. And that's not what I do with INXS. I don't do shuffles, I don't do stuff like that. Mine's a lot more kind of straight on. So I had to quickly develop some shuffles and play things like Rosanna and all those songs, So, but it was great. They were very patient with me. They were like making it kindergarten easy for me, because compared to their musical kind of prowess, I was a rock and roller, but not quite that level of like just being handed a chart and slotting straight in. But that was a really great experience, and I also enjoyed bringing a bit of a John Farriss rock to that stage. And it sounded great. It was really good. But that was another highlight was the great musical experience in Japan.
Yes.
Playing on stage with Ringo Starr was a big one for me.
We're going to ask, was Steve the guy, the conduit to get you in with Ringo to guest that night on Help With My Friends? Was that the link? Yeah.
Steve's my huckleberry. I mean, Steve's such a great friend. I mean, not only that, hooking up with Ringo, because I mean, because Steve understands that I taught myself drums listening to Ringo Starr, and my entire life was as a child was just Beatles,
Mm.
on every level. And of course, not only that, but the guys in the band that Steve was with Ringo at that time, with Todd Rundgren and Greg from Santana, this is an amazing lineup of guys, and yeah, Steve just said, "Hey Johnny, I think Ringo wants you to come on." I'm like, couldn't believe it. Basically, no rehearsal, just on, and I sat on his drum kit, which was just. I mean, I actually got off stage that night. I said, "I can die now. We're all good to go."
Yeah.
Did you get a moment to talk with Ringo afterwards, or have a chat? Yeah.
Hung out with him. I flew down to Melbourne the next day, and I was hanging out all day, backstage, and he was sitting next to me, reading a newspaper, and we'd have it was just fantastic. It was really good, and so that's that sort of thing. Like for Steve Lukather to do that for me, for Steve Lukather to go to the trouble to knowing that it was risking potentially, making Ringo have to go, what do you want, Steve? Instead Ringo's like, so he assessed that situation and he did it so well that enabled me to slip straight in, like I was part of the band. And then even the promoter asked me if I want to join the band and all this stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I said, 3 drummers is too much. One drummer.
Yeah, and look, takes us back when we spoke to Tim and Andrew. Obviously, you went over to England as a youngster with your father on the ship back in the 60s. There, is that right?
Yeah, the whole family. The ship was called the Flavio, and I actually just spoke to a gentleman who is in his 90s, who called me out of the blue from his old age home, saying he's so lonely because he misses my dad, and they met on that ship in 1964 or whatever it was.
Wow.
63, 64. I just had a broken leg, and I think I had my leg in a cast at the time.
Yes.
And so those days you travel by ship, or fly, and you do 4 or 5 stops on the way to England. But so we went over to England on the Flavio. Sorry, I think Flavio sounds like a really sexy soccer player.
Or a sexiest model in the cosmos, Fabio. Remember him?
I am Flavio. Sorry, Hayden, go on with that.
No, you went over to England. We heard Tim explain that you had a broken leg. I'm not sure how it broke from memory. Tim probably told the story, but you're probably way too young, I guess, to remember the trip in England. Or were you? Did you have any memory at all? Because
I do. One of the earliest memories I have, which I won't really share because I don't think it's gonna work. But something similar to what you see behind me is what I remember.
Yeah.
But that's another story for another time, when perhaps humanity's woken up a bit more.
But it must have been great that your father, had access to that trip where I think Tim and you met George Harrison backstage or something along those lines.
That part's a little bit hyperbole, I think.
Oh, okay.
Because as we know that Rolf Harris is now in prison for pedophilia. So we don't really sort of. I mean, that show we were on, we were there apparently in a TV studio at Rolf Harris's TV studio, whatever that was, wherever that was. Now this is a really crusty, very, very crumbly memory. Okay,
sure.
But I think what happens when you're in a green room or when you're in a TV studio, and sometimes they have TV monitors that you look at and you see what's either being broadcast or what's being queued up or what's whatever they're doing on television 3, they might be doing something else. I think we saw a queue up of a video of the Beatles, and then they broadcast that video or whatever that was, that packet, that production packet, on the Rolf Harris show, which to a child would translate to "they're on the show." Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So and I don't want to just shoot that
myth there,
with a surface to air missile, but sounds like I just did. But that would probably give more kudos to the story, really, But
Makes it more cute.
because
Don't worry about it.
When you speak to a Beatle and they go, "We never played in the Rolf Harris show,"
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
it's probably time to pull in your story a little.
We sense Tim's memory sometimes may not be as erudite as yours or Andrew's. Anyway,
Well, mine's probably bullshit too. But
no. With the original Sin album, we think this is sort of something which deserves giving some profile to basically undo, what was the songs for the original Sin album in 2010 and put them back together with your own sort of creative sort of bent on things. And I think you produced it with James Ash from Road Traders. Tell us a bit about that process, because it must have been hard for Andrew to maybe contemplate it, given he created a lot of them. How did you find that process of putting them back together? And for us, it was a satisfying listen. Particularly Mediate, I think that's version with Tricky is almost better than the original,
Well, some of those songs were, James Ash did the demos for them to construct a sort of a mud map of how different we're going to go. And so he kind of initiated, because he's engaged originally to be that producer there. And his role initially was he sort of went away in his own studio lab and come up with some renditions that were kept the theme, that were different enough to be not like the old recording, but enough to pursue and worthy of re-record. Okay, why re-record a song that's already fantastic and the production's great? So in my view, they all needed to be a lot more different than the originals to warrant a re-record. And to me, that was my challenge. So when James Ash started that stuff, and I became more and more involved in it, and as it sort of developed, I became just like the Richard Clapton album. It started with Mark Opitz, and now I ended up producing it. But so with the James Ash stuff, we had probably 5, 6, something like that amount of songs, and then from there it sort of grew. See, I took it over to America, and I was by myself over there, so I was hooking up with Ben Harper, and I hooked up with Rob Thomas in New York, and who else? John Mayer,
and Nick Acosta, and
and so I started so that Nick Acosta song. So when I did Kick, like I wanted to almost challenge myself to do a re-record, so you almost can't even tell what song it is, and that to me was a lot more of, a lot more fun with the project, because it was more almost cinematic. It was more like sort of something you could put underneath a film, like a film track or something, songs that maybe like, so, and then to go back to your question about Andrew and how did he feel? Yeah, I mean, that was his turn to maybe sit back a little bit and kind of like, oh, what are you doing with my song? But as we all know, that he might come along originally with Heaven Sent. You made mention of Heaven Sent before. That was an acoustic version.
Yeah.
When Andrew wrote that, it was like, it was this sort of ding-a-ding-a on acoustic guitar. And of course, we elevated the tempo and we turned it into a rock song. No different. Exactly the same thing. Except the other way around. So sometimes songs get brought and submitted, and they're completely different from how they end up being on the album. Sometimes they're almost verbatim as they're written, and other times they morph into a completely different sort of animal. That album was great fun. And it was great,
fantastic album, one of my favorites actually.
And then look, a lot of people say, why can't I find it on Spotify? Why can't I find it here and there? I mean, because there were so many guests on it, and everyone's got their own record company set up, and they've all got, it's a lot more complicated than just us releasing a song if it was just us 6 guys. But because there's other artists involved, usually there's politics involved or why things are.
I think I've got 3 copies.
Well, yeah, there's 3. Someone once said, I think, to do a cover song, you might as well mix it up, because why do it? And which is what sort of you've said there. And you look at, say, Joe Cocker, A Little Help from My Friends, is such a different style to the Beatles version. Help by John Farnham, such a different style to the Beatles version. And then Jealous Guy by Roxy Music, such a different version to John Lennon's version. But both versions of each of those songs stand on their own 2 feet. And I think, what you did with the original Sin thing, it created an immersive experience. And it would have been harder for the ardent fan to accept it. But if you're going to sign up for something like that, you have to be ambitious as a listener. And I think it did challenge the listener to the point where, things like, What I Say, I think JD did a Fortune. JD Fortune did a version.
Mr. Spy.
The Stairs did a version of that, which was fantastic. Tricky's version of and even Beautiful Girl with Pat Monahan,
Right.
was fantastic. You know, it
Right.
really, that's the cinematic type of.
Look, I agree, and we performed that with Pat on the Jay Leno show in California. Now, what's interesting about most of all those songs on that album is there's about 3 or 4 different versions with all different singers on them. So it was a massive.
When are we going to hear those?
Well, I don't know if you ever will, because it's just.
We do.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
but, I mean,
no, that's fine.
It's so complicated.
There were some restrictions, I think, with the gentleman from the Killers, wasn't there? Being able to getting a release from his company because he had a solo album coming out, I think, at the time.
And there's always that.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's always things like that. Not only that, but at the time, someone may have had, really into it, and then a few months later, their situation changes. So we had to roll and ride with that, and that's why it was such a hard project to kind of. I mean, it was really challenging, and wow, but it was really great experience, and I really loved it. And look, depending on what sort of what interests you with INXS, it could just. People might just like the album, and that's fine for them. Sometimes if you get in too deep and find out too much about the artist, you go, I don't actually really like them because they're not very nice after all, or whatever it is, or when you see some footage of them in the studio recording that album, you go, that's not how I pictured that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I pictured that was a different thing, and oh wow, that's really changed my whole.
Have you? Yeah.
People's perception is I've got to explain this. Is it really important that you just contain a bit of mystery in there, because mystery is what helps glue a lot of this stuff together. And now that we've all got the social media and all this shit, there's no mystery anymore, and it's taken away that part of your brain which fills in the blanks that's more personal to you. And I think that when things are a bit more mysterious, you actually make them more personal because you fill in the blanks with your personal way you view it.
Have you heard of the Mandela effect?
I have indeed.
Yeah, it's sometimes a nice place to be. Thinking some version of things are the versions.
So do your viewers know what the Mandela effect is? Do you think?
I think I've spoken about it before. That is, I think it harks back to people being misconstruing at the date he was released from prison. That's the genesis of the idea, where people got the dates wrong as to when he was released from prison. But the bigger purpose.
From what I understand, is that people have different memories.
Yeah.
So someone could say, "I remember that he died in prison."
Yes. Yes.
That's not getting a date wrong. That's a memory.
Yes.
But the Mandela is, in fact, what they're talking about is timeline shifts.
Yes.
Now that's a whole different quantum. That's a whole different quantum level of discussion. But I'm interested that you brought that up because that's a field of research I'm really heavily involved in. So I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
But the Mandela effect, I guess if that's been coined now in a pop sense, that it's
it's not so much in a pop sense. It is coined in the spirit of the way you've said it about our memories or time sequences or our version of events are sometimes littered with two outcomes or thoughts or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe we have a non-INXS topic we can dive deep on next time with you. The last thing we're just going to go through, and more on a positive level, is memories of Michael living in Hong Kong together, recording together, his lyrics to your, Sonics, and just the time together. We know it's 25 years next month since he passed. We try fly a flag high for him. We don't get into the scuttlebutt of everything that went on. We are thankful for what he did, and we are thankful for the music. But tell us about, your relationship with him in Hong Kong. I think you lived there for about 12 years all up, roughly, I think, were you?
Yeah, I was a resident from 1987 to 1999, so it's 12 years.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. It was really great because you've got to understand that when Michael moved the year before I did, so he was already kind of over there in 86, which is while we're in the middle of recording Kick. And at that point is when I started to go, you know what, I might do the same move, but I was just a bit behind him. But what that was is we were starting to come back from touring, internationally and gaining traction. Like we were getting, we were starting to make a lot of noise around the planet at that point. And that created obviously it sort of into the stardom status as it was starting to get bigger and bigger. Of course, Michael was they were picking Michael out more than me, and that was okay with me, but what I'm saying is we come back to Australia, and after reaching great heights over there, we come back to Australia, and we'd get shot down because we'd be trying to explain what we were doing. People would be going, "Oh, mate, stop bragging," and all that sort of stuff. But what we're trying to do is just like say, "Hey, we did this, and it was amazing. We did that," and so because Australians being a little bit insecure, we tend to just sort of not talk about it. Okay, and so we come back to Australia, and we just have to get shuffle along like we were, like 10 years ago, like nothing happened. Make to appease everyone else. And when we went to Hong Kong, it was even like, who the fuck are you? I mean, we were just expats. We were a minority. We'd get off the plane in Kai Tak Airport, and we'd get a little taxi, and we'd get back to our little shitty apartment in mid-levels in Hong Kong. And we were humbled like big time. I was really humbling. Is probably the best way I could explain that. So it was good for us. So we'd come back from all this lofty kind of experience where everything was laid out and red carpet this and VIP this, and we get in Hong Kong, and it's kind of like, get in line.
Yeah.
And you're just a Hong Kongian. So those days were great because we were rascals, we were scallywags. It was the end of a amazing sort of Western bloc inside an Eastern, like a little Western oasis in this Eastern bloc that had a finite amount of time left. We knew that in 1997 it was going to be handed back to China. And so that it was like West Berlin, the same thing. So Richard Clapton and I used to go to West Berlin a lot because of the same isolation. That was this incredible kind of community, this artistic community. Hong Kong was not, I would call, anything artistic. It was just very, it was diverse, and it enabled us to really experience a whole lot of culture, all compact into this little city. When I say little, I mean it was 10 million people in this one space. Yeah. They always said if everyone came out of the buildings at once, no one would fit.
Oh.
But that was really great for Michael and I, because we were just sort of completely separate from the music business. We were separate from everywhere else. It gave us this completely unique little isolated bubble that we were able to write and have fun in.
Yeah. And I guess, the rapport that you guys had. I mean, it's interesting with the songwriting. Often you see songwriting in a band and almost mirrors the start of their career when they all live together. And then later in the career, you and Michael lived together. And I guess through convenience and stuff like that is where songs come from, just when you're living together, between sort of the swing and listen like these, it's separated from each other a little bit, but, it must be interesting dynamic, as you said, to be putting music down in a room. Then Michael comes in and just comes up with a lyric,
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was just bizarre because if we were in Australia, well, we were still not, we didn't have money at that point. We were still, we had to combine what we had and come together. So some of us would share hotel rooms and we'd share apartments from here and there. But once we were able to get our own hotel room and we were able to afford our own apartment, we never went back to live together, because we were with each other all dang day anyway. We were on the road 24/7 together. We were backstage together. And so when Michael and I went back to Hong Kong after touring, we'd go home to our own apartment we shared, which was bizarre. That adults at 25 years old are still, sharing an apartment. But see, as soon as we finish a tour and we go back to Hong Kong, we're not in INXS anymore. We're just a couple of guys,
Yeah.
And so it was just like we were mates, and just so happened that we were in a band together, and just so happened that we like to write music.
Yeah.
And that was really a simple. And so in a way that was a gift, because it wasn't as contrived as it may sound.
Yeah. How accurate was the miniseries, John?
Yeah.
Oh, look, for television, I mean,
what did you think of it now? I mean, we love everything, right? But I mean, for you, it must be hard to look back. Obviously, for dramatic effects, certain things would probably go a certain way. But how do you look at the miniseries that was put together?
Well, good question. I mean, it's not something that I have just orbiting in my frontal lobe all the time. So from memory, some things were pretty accurate and some things were way off. And other things were like exaggerated, like there's certain things that are exaggerated. And there were some things that weren't played up hardly at all, that in my view were much more either amazing or whatever. Look, you know, it's about as good as it can be with a huge room full of politics. You've got TV producers trying to satisfy TV moguls. Okay.
Yeah.
This isn't a really sort of sanitized, you know, room where we're making a movie and we're bringing in all the parts and even then that would still be just our version of what we think that happened. So a television's producer who's trying to extrapolate all these stories from different people and put it together to satisfy television, it's about as good as it could have been, I guess. So if you catch my drift, that combination of parts and elements to make up a TV show, it's never going to be absolutely accurate. You know?
So what would you have emphasized a bit more?
Look, again, it's not something that I can rewind and play in my head very accurately. So, and I haven't really labored on it. I haven't really thought much about it.
Okay, we'll move on then. We've got plenty of one.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing it. I remember watching it, going, you know, like, look, it's very hard if there's a scene about you and your mother. You know, how can that ever be translated properly? You know, I mean, you know, if I'm there going, that's not what happened, then they go, oh yeah, but see, we can only do this or we can only do that, so that's the best we can come up with. When you're okay, well, so we're negotiating. Now we're negotiating about a scene that happened. They're never ever going to be completely accurate. But I thought it was kind of cute, you know. It was a cute TV thing. I don't think I wouldn't use it if I was doing a thesis on INXS. I wouldn't use it as a benchmark for things.
Yeah. And it got people talking. I mean, me and my neighbors were talking about it. The people at school were talking about it, you know, and then the ratings went up. And
it's great. What it did was it made a lot of people who are in a different generation realize something that they may have missed.
I think what it did, it really highlighted to the average Australian the tenacity and the hard work it took to do what you did. And there's this great scene at the end where they interspose the real footage of you guys and everything there. And it was so inspiring. A lot of people online, I think you were online that night it was on too, John. I think I might have sent a picture of my number plate, which arrogantly has INXS 1, and you replied to me. But that night, the miniseries, that miniseries was on that night, and you were online. But there were so many people like had tears in their eyes, going, "Wow, I just never knew." I just never knew that's what they had to do, because there wasn't the internet back then. There wasn't this sort of groundswell of social media support that would create a bubble that you would ride on. It was almost like this hidden secret that needed explaining to the average Joe. And I think that's the greatest thing it did.
Oh, look, and I'll just sort of add to what you just said. And thanks, that was a very good kind of a nice broad summary. I think you're right. And I don't want to discount those positive elements at all about that series, because I thought it was, on that basis, was really good. I think it's very, very hard to translate to an audience just how much work was involved, you know, without it being a boring show. I mean, you don't want to watch hours and hours of people working, you know what I mean? But you have to be showing these highlights to try and get some context of just how much sacrifice there was. You know, look, we were just talking about being our kids at the same age, okay?
Yeah.
Now, I was on tour watching my brothers not be with their children, okay?
Yeah.
That was really heavy, and it was really hard, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, my worst enemy. That was one of the hardest things I watched them endure, that separation from their little kids. Now, that was their choice, and I'm grateful that they did that, because we wouldn't have done what we did. But there were great sacrifices, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's a big sacrifice.
And those sacrifices, you can't come back, and they're these life lessons. And a lot of time it gets pulled back in the music. And I think it goes back to the very beginning of this podcast. We were talking about, the melting pot of inspiration, why songs are written, and how we might mature as we start to write songs, and our skill sets get bigger. I think it's more, the more you live, the more you learn, and the more heartbreak you have, that adds to your passion and your compassion. And I think that's the sort of story that's hard to put in a TV show,
Yeah.
But you got it. So I'm really, really grateful that you pointed that out. It's nice.
Yeah, no, it was it brought a lot of the community, INXS community, together as well, of the fans. It brought us all together, and it brought us out, because like I was saying to Hayden, I hid my INXS under the bed for a long time, because and then I was like, oh my God, there's lots of, you were under my bed for
in the closet,
not anymore.
No, but there was
under my bed.
Yeah, we've gone through on our podcast, we've gone through the concert for life, the greatness of the concert, and then the exploitation, I think, that came of that. And I think Chris Murphy didn't do the band any favors when it came to getting stuck into things and making you guys sort of not say anything after the concert and be quiet and whatever, And that's just my own personal opinion. I think you were all told to don't say anything. The media don't get it. And all this great money for Vincent Chang and all the great goodwill, I don't think was ever, quite acknowledged. And we've gone through that little tall poppy period about where, there was this negative throwback INXS domestically. And we think that mini series had a lot of those sort of closet fans come back and realize,
Yeah, I agree, Hayden. I think there was some amelioration from that, definitely. I think, that was ameliorated somehow through a little bit of healing, of a bit of recognition that came back. I agree with that. I think I was really happy. I mean, we were all very happy that there was this great, there was a couple of months there where you couldn't avoid INXS. I mean, it was like full on, and it reminded me of the days when we were doing it, So that was, from memory, it was 2014, and a lot happening, and the albums were going ballistic. Everything was back on the charts.
Yes. Everything's recharting. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it's like wow, wow, and for that I'm eternally grateful. Just so long as the connections are genuine, authentic. That, to me, is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Look, the last thing I'll mention, and I'll definitely be my last one, would be, I think, from behalf of a lot of our listeners and things like that, and we've tried to sort of feed in some of their questions via ourselves and things. I think it's, Kirk seems very happy, Andrew, Tim, everybody seems very happy in their own sort of lives now. Is there another chapter or another angle for INXS sort of going forward? I don't believe, and I don't sense, nor do I covet the fact that they need to go and retour and everything like that again, but is there any... Is it about the heritage and the legacy of the songs and the material? And I know we've got Shabu Shabar being reissued next week, which is great. Is there another chapter within the band that you can foresee? We've got ABBA do bloody, the Voyager thing with all that sort of footage. Do you see another pathway for INXS in some way in your life or the other band members? Not at recording or touring, but just some capacity?
Oh yeah, look, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and believe it or not, the catalog is huge, and because the catalog is huge, it's got a life of its own now, and that's managed by Sam Evans with Petrol Records, and so that's amazing because we've always been interested in pursuing things that were just outside the cookie cut rock and roll band stuff. We're always interested in film or theatrical, something that's just unusual. And so there's a lot of things out there. I mean, I won't mention too much because Chris used to come out and do a lot of kind of like what's the word, like little hints and little kind of hinting at something, or he would drop a little Easter egg and there'd be you never know, this might happen here, and all those things are still at play. But in terms of us getting into a room and recording, I think that's very unlikely at the moment. I can't. I'm not going to say no, but there's no plans right now for that.
We did a thing with Sam Evans last year with the short film that came out, Original Sin, that
7 Deadly Sins. Was it?
7 Deadly Sins. We sort of got the press kit and helped sort of do that via your website, and she was lovely to deal with and things as well. But yeah, I mean, I think the catalogue, as you said, I mean, we've got, ironically, this month, this last 2 weeks, it's actually milestone week. You've had Listen Like Thieves, Shabu Shabar, Strangest Party, Just Keep Walking. All these things have all been released seemingly mid-October. And on Twitter at the moment, they're all going off with, 40 years, 30 years, 25 years, or whatever there. So I guess with all that depth of catalogue, you've always got a milestone and something being remembered, which is great. And I know the dance music scene, I guess, through the stuff that, has happened over the years, it's been great seeing other artists take some of your stuff like Dua Lipa recently, Precious Heart, I think from Tall Paul many years ago. A lot of your stuff has actually been, taken and used for, modern consumption, put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. It's great to know that there's still, burgeoning, younger demographic artists who are not completely cutting themselves off from the past, who are able to look back and recognize something that inspired them and integrate that in as a compliment to me. I mean, that's a compliment to the band. As they say, someone copying something of yours is a compliment, and I'd rather have that than just be sort of in completely sort of disappearing into the abyss. I mean, so just so long as any burgeoning artist still can have some connection to the past, to understand the cultural evolution of how we got to where we are with music, all of us, yeah. So
I think I think INXS weren't operating in silos. I mean, you were a drummer, you could play guitar, you were very keen on the sequencing, the programming side. I think you were very much in the live scene, very keen with supporting the crew and the lighting team and the production. And you seem to always have quite a vested interest in the live show, I think, as well. And I don't think you always saw yourself as silo as a drummer only,
No, I mean, to the point where maybe I should have been more, because I was never a drummer's drummer. I was never just sitting around reading drum magazines. I mean, it was really something I taught myself that I loved, I was passionate about, but I never gave it that much. Like, I was never there all day just practicing all day long. I wasn't rudiment guy, just sort of. But I learnt my chops on stage, and so I did all my growing and developing on stage, and all the time off stage, I was developing other stuff. So I was teaching myself, computer, sequencing software, digital editing, and integrating different sound effects and recording techniques, and learning just production techniques and all those.
I think some of your peers like Larry Mullen and that emulated that stuff with you a little bit. I know you were a bit of a pioneer with it, and frowned upon from some people originally. But
frowned upon. Now it's okay to go out, stick a USB stick. And stand and go woo, and you got 10,000 people think that's amazing. Like, please explain, okay? Because I remember doing a gig, Radio City Music Hall, a huge, very prestigious New York gig in the early 80s, and we had this review there, and I read the review just by accident recently, and in the review it's got the bands that's kick ass, and man, they got this backbeats really great, and the solid, the top end's great, and all this stuff, and they go, but it sounds like the drummer's got like sound like there's a drum box in the background somewhere. I mean, and it was like, it was a poo-poo. It was like, poo-poo, that's not live. I'm going, sorry, when was the last time you tried to play live with a drum machine while you try to do a gig with 6 people? Like, that's not easy, okay?
It's not like you're playing with a click track or anything, was it?
Well, I was. That's the point, is that playing with a click track and having it...
monotone, that is, yeah.
Well, but see what I'm saying? Like, when you're a pioneer, you get poo-pooed on until it becomes acceptable, and then it's absolutely fine. But no one seems to remember that back then you were getting poo-pooed about it. I mean,
like Pet Sounds, that was poo-pooed, wasn't it?
I think so, from memory. Pet Sounds.
Pet Sounds, the Beach Boys,
Beach Boys. Well, exactly, and because I mean, you go Sloop John B and all that sort of stuff. I mean, beautiful songs on that record. Absolutely right. So I enjoy being a pioneer and this stuff. I enjoy usually being misunderstood, because it takes a little while for everyone to understand what I'm doing and what I'm interested in. That's why I was never a drummer's drummer, although I have all the respect in the world for any drummer's drummer, because that's what makes the drumming world go around. But for me, I was more interested in technical things and production things, which is why I ended up being involved with the road crew, and I enjoyed the road crew and used to be really involved with those guys, and I loved them very much because that's what made it happen. And I just loved production, and I was the guy up the back, in the middle. I could see the flanks left and right. I could see who was doing what, and so I had a real visceral involvement with the production.
So Motley, Motley.
I know Motley very well.
Yes, I hear that. I speak to him quite regularly, and yeah, he's over in Europe at the moment, I think, doing stuff.
Well, he's been working with
Kids. Yes,
that's right. That's why.
That's right.
And yeah, most bands that come to Australia now use INXS crews. So Elton John took a lot of INXS's crew. Kiss has a lot of INXS crew. We've had a really great reputation for having the best crew in the world, and that's so. You always find our crew guys are always with some really great, really, established artists, because they only want the best. And so it was really lovely and a really great compliment to know that any guy who was in our crew was there simply because it was a real honor.
Yeah.
And so I look so fondly to my road crew guys. I love them. Like I miss them so much, and I love that. I'll miss the touring crew, military style, getting it together no matter what your obstacle is. We overcome that and we kick ass. I mean, that was just a great. I love that.
Well, you spent so much time together. Oh my God, years and years of it.
Yeah. Hey, remember the band in the 80s? Does Johnny hate jazz? Does Johnny like jazz?
Johnny loves jazz.
There was a band in the 80s, Johnny hates jazz. So drummers generally come from a jazz background, and there was a Charlie Watts. Yeah, do you like jazz?
I absolutely. I mean, I love it. I mean, I was sort of more because I realized I wasn't like classically trained, so I recognized that I wasn't a jazz player, but I love jazz, and I would listen to more jazz fusion or rock jazz rock. Especially in the 70s, we had things like Weather Report, Steely Dan, and all these types of. That's the sort of stuff I'd be really interested in. And later on, I got the John Coltrane and Miles Davis and all that sort of stuff. A little bit of jazz was definitely inspired in my playing. But as I said, I wasn't a traditionally trained jazz. I wasn't traditionally trained at all. But I would just steal little things, little jazzy things. But I don't have I don't have, what's the word? I don't have the right to call myself a jazz player.
So is that right?
Jazz players.
So is that right? Your dad bought you your first drum kit when you were a baby?
Yeah, well, I got my first drum, I don't know, I was probably 2 or 3, and then my dad made me, because we didn't have money, so he made this kind of drum. It was like a tambourine drum almost, without the jingles on it, and he put it on like a kitchen stool and painted it, and that was my birthday present for my, I don't know, 6th birthday or something. And then he just put me in a room and play marching band music. And so I'd start doing that, and then I'd take that record off and put the Beatles on. and then we were looking at a newspaper one day in Perth, Western Australia, in 1965 or 66 or something, and there was a drum kit for sale for $55. I remember going, "It's so expensive. That's so much money. My God!" And I mentioned it to Dad in passing. Like, "Hey, look, there's a drum kit for sale. Like, just
leave it there."
Yeah, exactly. And then I came back a couple of days later, and there it was, and it had no hi-hat pedal. It didn't have a hi-hat.
Yeah.
And it didn't have a floor tom, and it had one little cymbal, which I think caked in lid would have sounded better. A snare and a little tom. And so I taught myself drums to play with my kick drum with my left foot.
Oh.
I didn't know. Until one day someone said a couple of years later, "Hey, what about a hi-hat?" I'm like, what's that?
What's that?
You need to use other foot, yeah.
And so I go, "Where do you put that?" So I put the hi-hat over here on the right side of the floor tom, going, that doesn't look right,
Yeah.
So then I moved it over where most drummers have it, and then I had to put my right foot on it and learn how to tap with my right foot and do that. So that created me now to be able to play drums using my left foot and kick.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
You had very tolerable parents, didn't you?
I know. I bless them. Absolutely.
I
Bea.
love them. I never met them, but like I
We-
just
we-
love
but-
them that they gave birth to you and gave you
Thanks,
that
Bea.
room
I know, thanks,
to
Bea.
be
Well,
so creative.
You nailed it. And being a parent,
Oh God, yeah.
that was the gift. That was the gift. It was just them giving us space until the day they said, for God's sake, can at least the three of you play in the same bloody band, because you're practicing in three different rooms and I'm about to lose my shit.
I can't imagine having that noise in the house.
I've got to give you a three-minute wrap because I've got to take my son to gymnastics.
Okay.
B and I, we had back in May, a 2-year anniversary of our podcast, and we did a INXS Northern Beaches tour. We went to
On a
Michael's
bus.
on a bus, and it had the music going, and then we went to Michael's Memorial. We went to Davidson High School. We went to your home. B went and door knocked your home.
We made it into a little documentary. I'll send it to you if you like.
The lady answered the door. She had COVID. She couldn't let us in, but she waved to 30 people downstairs outside your old home. We went to the factory where Clemo used to let you guys rehearse.
Yeah, Clemo, good old Clemo.
Remember Clemo?
Yeah,
the factory area there. Apparently, you guys owed a lot of money for rental, but then you decided to play a concert, and there were lots of people in the industrial street. So we really are getting to the essence. We went to the Stay Young film clip area down in, where's that be?
Clontarf.
Oh yeah.
We found the beach. We went. Darren Jones came with us as well, and Helen Kirkwood. Do you remember Helen? She used to hang out with Darren. So we've got this whole community. We've got something at present time. We've got around about 70 people that actually help us and support us and pay for us to keep this show going. And they've sent out loads and loads of questions which we haven't got time for, but can I just say their names to you, because they would love to hear their names said to you. And the biggest person that I need to speak to you about is our gorgeous Laurie. She is a massive fan of yours, and she would just love you. She is great chick. Yes, please give her a kiss. Send her a kiss. That would be wonderful.
I sent her 2 kisses.
Okay, so we've got Laurel and Maria, Paul Buckley, Ryder, Bard. He's all the way from Norway. Lisa Mack, Ella, she's from the Netherlands. Joe from the UK. Genevieve from Canada. Danielle from Florida in the US. Laurie from Chicago. Tracy from UK. Manny from the UK. Carmen from the Wollongong. David from UK. Jim from Melbourne. Mandy from the UK. Pedro from Portugal, Andrew from South Australia, and Katie asked her what question she'd have. She says, seriously, what's your telephone number? But we have lots of questions, and maybe
we've weaved a few of them in anyway.
We have. Look for another quarter, maybe 3 or 4 months, and we'll do another one. And I'll put some time aside, and I'll give you 2 hours, something like that. How's that sound?
Oh, that'd be great. Lovely.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Lovely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you, and also to give me the opportunity to say thanks to everybody out there who's not only supported your platform and your podcast, but who's been there for all those years, even if it's minutes. Thank you. It's all wonderful. We all are from the same. We're all cut from the same cloth, and we're all going to the same place. So we're all in there together. I just want to say thanks and just love everybody, and just loving life. And it's just so great. There's people like you out there. So thank you for being you and everything you're doing. It's fantastic. And wherever you are, have a beautiful one. Hope the floods aren't too bad down there. Hayden.
Thank you.
Love to all. And God bless you, sweetheart. And we'll see you soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.
Judas kiss our betrayal. I will not let it break me. Here comes my heart breaking. I'm in love for you and more. Hey. You come my way, elation.